Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who believed the rules applied to everyone except themselves? Because that's exactly what happened to me. For 23 years, I had opened my workshop before sunrise. Every morning followed the same routine. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other, bay door rolling upward as the first light touched the concrete floor. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work. Steel fabrication, welding, repairs. Everything I built carried my name, and that reputation had taken decades to earn. Instead, the moment the bay door reached the top, I froze. A silver Mercedes was parked right in the center of my workshop. Not outside. Inside my building. On my workbench sat a key fob as if it belonged there. And standing near my drill press was a woman casually scrolling through her phone, acting like she owned the place. She barely looked up. "You the owner?" she asked. "I am." Without even apologizing, she nodded once. "I'm Linda Marsh, president of the HOA. I have a neighborhood inspection next door, so I needed somewhere to leave my car. I'll be back in an hour or two." No permission. Just an announcement. For a few seconds I honestly thought she was joking. Then I looked behind her car. My client's custom steel order, 40 pounds of structural bar, was trapped behind the Mercedes. My 8 o'clock job was impossible to reach. The customer had driven 40 minutes for that pickup. I looked back at Linda. She calmly picked up her clipboard. "I've been very generous with your little workshop," she said. "You should be thanking me instead of giving me that look." She walked toward the side door. Then she stopped just long enough to deliver 4 words that would change everything. "Don't touch my car." And she walked away. I stood alone inside my own workshop, staring at a vehicle that had no business being there. The workshop wasn't HOA property. It wasn't shared community space. It wasn't even inside their jurisdiction. Legally, it was mine. At 7:52 my phone buzzed. Through the window I watched his truck waiting outside. I had no way to finish his order. No way to reach the materials. 20 minutes later he drove away. Just like that. One morning's income had disappeared. Because someone decided my business was her parking garage. I walked slowly around the Mercedes. Untouched. Expensive. The kind of car its owner expected everyone else to admire. Then my eyes drifted toward the upper corner of the building. The security camera. 6 months earlier I'd installed it after a cordless drill disappeared. The tiny red light blinked steadily. I checked the clock. The camera had already captured nearly 90 minutes. Linda driving inside, ignoring my request, walking away, and warning me not to touch her car. Every second, time-stamped forever. I smiled. Not because I had a plan. 23 years working with steel teaches you patience. Metal always tells the truth. Stress builds quietly until one moment. Most people mistake silence for weakness. Linda Marsh had just made that exact mistake. I didn't call the HOA. I didn't chase after her. Instead, I put on my welding gloves and got back to work. She had no idea. She had just walked straight into the biggest mistake of her entire career. I didn't spend the rest of that morning arguing. Arguments don't matter when the facts are already on your side. Instead, I worked around the Mercedes as best I could. Small repairs, tool maintenance, anything that didn't require the center bay. Still there. 9 o'clock came, then 10. Linda never returned. By 9:45, I decided it was time to start documenting everything. I pulled out my phone. Every tire. The blocked steel. The workshop floor. The license plate. 47 photographs. Every single one time-stamped. As I stepped outside, my neighbor Dave was trimming the edge of his lawn. He looked over and shook his head. "I saw everything," he said before I even spoke. He smiled. "I've got nowhere else to be." That was all I needed to hear. Independent. Reliable. Then I walked 3 streets over to Linda's house. Her front yard looked exactly how you'd expect. Perfect flowers. Perfect decorations. Everything arranged with military precision. I knocked twice. She opened the door almost immediately. She'd clearly seen me coming. "I'm asking one last time," I said calmly. Instead of answering, she disappeared into the house. A moment later she returned carrying one of her famous HOA folders. She opened it dramatically. She handed me a printed notice. HOA violation. $500. For operating a commercial business. I looked at the paper, then back at her. "County zoning allows my workshop. Take it up with the board." She smiled. "The car." For the first time, her expression changed. Not angry. Confident. The confidence of someone who thinks they're untouchable. "The car stays until I'm ready to move it." She crossed her arms. "Your workshop was available." Available. She actually said available. I took one slow breath. "I'm asking one final time. Move your vehicle. And if you touch it, I'll have you arrested." Every word was crystal clear. Then she smiled. "We understand each other?" I nodded politely. "We do." I turned around and walked away. She never noticed the phone recording inside my shirt pocket. Every threat, every admission, every word, captured perfectly. Back at the workshop, I reviewed everything I had collected. Nearly 5 hours of uninterrupted security footage. 47 photographs. An audio recording of the HOA president threatening me. A witness who had seen the entire incident. And one very important document sitting on my desk. Section 12 of the HOA bylaws. One sentence changed everything. The HOA has no authority over separately deeded private structures. I read it again. Then I smiled. My workshop wasn't inside HOA jurisdiction. It never had been. Linda had spent years pretending otherwise. She'd find me over paint colors. She'd even tried claiming my welding business violated community standards. But according to her own governing documents, she had absolutely no authority over this property. That realization changed everything. This wasn't just about a parked Mercedes anymore. The retired couple forced to remove a memorial bird feeder. The single mother threatened over a tiny driveway crack. The teenager whose basketball hoop had been confiscated. Everyone had simply paid the fines because fighting the HOA was expensive. Linda counted on that. She believed nobody would ever challenge her. She had no idea. She had finally picked the wrong person. I looked once more at the silver Mercedes sitting silently in the middle of my workshop. Then I reached for my welding helmet. If Linda wanted to make this a legal battle, I was going to make sure every single move she made became evidence against her. Instead, I packed a small overnight bag, locked every door and left town. Not because I was running, because sometimes the smartest move is giving someone enough time to make every possible mistake. Before leaving, I copied every second of the security footage onto a USB drive. The video, the photographs, the parcel deed, the HOA boundary maps, every document I'd collected over the last 14 months. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. Martin had already watched the beginning of the footage. His first question surprised me. Did she really park there without asking? I didn't leave that part out? What? Let her keep moving. Every decision she makes from this point forward is going to help you. So I listened. The following morning, Linda returned to the workshop. She confidently pressed her key fob. She pressed it again. Still nothing. She walked around the Mercedes, clearly confused. She called roadside assistance. An hour later, a technician arrived. He examined the vehicle carefully, then stood up. "Ma'am, this wasn't an accident. We can't touch this. You'll need a specialist." Linda's confidence disappeared. She called 911. 2 police officers arrived. They asked the obvious questions. Yes. Silence. A very long silence. The officers looked around the workshop. Private building. Private property. Separate address. Separate parcel. Linda had just created the first official police record proving her own trespassing. She didn't even realize it. I was nearly 2 states away visiting an old friend named Gary. We spent the afternoon drinking coffee and talking about welding projects from years ago. For the first time in days, missed call. Missed call. Missed call. 11 in total. I ignored everyone. Then I checked voicemail. The third message was from Dave. Hey! I saw the police. I saw everything. You've got one. He paused. Actually, so do several other neighbors. That message changed everything. Linda thought the neighborhood feared her. Instead, the next morning Martin called again. His voice sounded almost amused. She hired a lawyer. I figured she would. She also filed a criminal vandalism complaint. I leaned back in my chair. So, in order to accuse you of damaging her vehicle, she has to admit where her vehicle was. And according to her own complaint, it was parked inside your private workshop. Martin continued. So does her 911 call. She has now created multiple official records proving she placed her own car on property she didn't own. I couldn't help laughing. She built the rope herself. Martin laughed too. And now she's pulling it tighter. But Linda wasn't finished. The HOA mailed me another notice. $5,000. Commercial activity. If unpaid, they would place a lien against my property. Exactly the same tactic she'd used against dozens of homeowners before. Most people couldn't afford to fight. They simply paid. That was how Linda controlled the neighborhood. Fear. Paperwork. Legal language. But she had overlooked one tiny detail. Section 12. The fine had absolutely no legal foundation. Martin already knew it. I already knew it. The only person who didn't know was Linda. Then she made one final mistake. She posted on the neighborhood community app. Claimed I had vandalized her vehicle. Accused me of refusing to cooperate with police. She even published my workshop address. She thought everyone would support her. Instead, something unexpected happened. Residents began messaging me privately. The retired couple she'd fined. The single mother she'd threatened. Families she'd bullied for years. People started sharing their own stories. Old notices. Fine letters. Emails. Photographs. Evidence. The pile kept growing. Now, the entire neighborhood wanted answers. She had no idea. The truth was about to walk straight into the next HOA meeting. 3 days after leaving town, I drove straight from the highway to the police station. Not home. The police station. Under my arm was a manila folder. Inside it were 23 years of patience. And 3 days of proof. The detective handling Linda Marsh's vandalism complaint introduced himself as Detective Ray Callahan. He looked tired, experienced, and completely uninterested in neighborhood politics. Exactly the kind of officer I wanted. I placed the USB drive on his desk. This starts at 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. He plugged it into his computer. The footage began. The empty workshop. Then the bay door opened. Linda's silver Mercedes rolled inside. She parked it in the center bay. Dropped her key fob on my workbench. Several minutes later, I appeared on camera. The detective watched our conversation. He watched me ask her politely to move the car. He watched her walk away. Then he watched hours pass. No edits. No cuts. Just one uninterrupted recording. When Linda finally returned with roadside assistance, then he watched the police officers arrive. He watched Linda standing beside her own car, inside my workshop. Finally, he pressed pause. The room became silent. I opened my folder. First came the deed. Separate tax record. Purchased years before the HOA even existed. Then came the HOA's own boundary map. The detective studied it carefully. His finger followed the property lines. Then he looked up. So this building? No. Never. He nodded slowly. Then opened Linda's complaint. He compared it with the police report she had filed. Everything matched. Inside private property. Without permission. Then asked me one question. Did she actually tell you not to touch the car? I played the audio recording. Her voice filled the room. The detective listened twice. Then closed the folder. This case is going a very different direction. My heart didn't race. I wasn't excited. I simply felt relieved. Because the truth had finally reached someone willing to read it. By the time I arrived back at the workshop that evening, the Mercedes was still sitting exactly where she'd left it. The security camera still blinked quietly above the bay. It had witnessed everything. From the first second to the last. I carefully removed the barriers that had kept the vehicle exactly where it was. Now the evidence had already been preserved. There was nothing left to prove. 3 days later, Martin called. The vandalism complaint has been dismissed. No charges. Linda's attorney had quietly withdrawn every civil claim before it ever reached court. Then came even better news. The HOA's lawyer had reviewed the parcel deed and the original founding documents. Their conclusion was simple. The workshop had never belonged under HOA jurisdiction. The $5,000 fine? Cancelled. The lien? Withdrawn. Even the old fines I'd paid years earlier were officially declared invalid. But paperwork wasn't the biggest consequence. The neighborhood had finally had enough. Dave, Walt, and dozens of homeowners who had spent years paying unfair fines started organizing. A recall petition spread through Sycamore Ridge. Within days, Linda Marsh resigned as HOA president. She didn't wait for the vote. She already knew how it would end. Their very first meeting lasted less than an hour. The first motion? Remove every improper fine issued against my property. Passed unanimously. No homeowner could ever receive another violation notice without photographic evidence reviewed by the full board. Also unanimous. The abuse ended that night. A week later, Walt stopped by my fence. He smiled. No one's taking it down this time. That simple sentence meant more than any courtroom victory ever could. Because this had never really been about my workshop. It had been about everyone who had stayed silent because they believed nobody would stand up. Now someone finally had. A month later. Not because the old one had failed. It had done its job perfectly. But every workshop deserves good eyes. Especially one that had watched justice unfold frame by frame. He backed his truck into the center bay. No blocked entrance. No unauthorized cars. No clipboard. No HOA president. Just honest work. Exactly the way it had always been meant to be. Sometimes people think justice arrives with shouting, or revenge, or dramatic courtroom speeches. It arrives through facts, patience, evidence. And the moment someone finally asks one simple question, did you actually have permission? For Linda Marsh, there was never an answer. For everyone else in Sycamore Ridge, that answer changed everything.